Welcome to the Audio Slave podcast. My name is Nate, and I'm here with my friends, my homies, my fellow nerd, Anthony and Tony, episode 134. How you guys doing?
Good. I actually wasn't sure when you were starting, and you're very intense. Our listeners can't see it, but Nate's stroking his beard very aggressively. So I think we're in for Nate's monologues tonight.
Oh boy,
Yes.
another night of Nate's monologues. I love it. I'm in. I mean, we've done 133 other ones of these, right? So let's do more of them. So yeah, I'm Tony. We're excited to get back at it again this week. We've got a couple fun things to throw at you, music related, and yeah, you boys ready to do this or what?
I am ready, and I'm still thinking about last week's episode. So much, in fact, that I pulled a Nate and I plugged in every show in the greater New England area that I might want to go to into my calendar.
I love that. Oh,
and I'm
my
like,
God.
I won't even have any shot at going to that, but I want to at least have the option.
I'm in. Let's go.
Let's fucking go.
Let's go to all of them.
That just made my whole year because there's some nerdery involved in there, right? Because you pull it up in your calendar, you're like, oh, sweet. You know, Newfound Glory is playing Worcester Palladium today. Cool. Be great to be there. You know, I can kind of vicariously be there today, but I'll be at work.
Well, it also prevents me from pulling like the day of, like, hey, what do we got going on tonight?
Right. You already knew. I got tickets to, such and such. I'm going to that.
Yeah,
You're driving to New York? Yeah, sorry, babe.
I can't miss it.
And sometimes it works, right? You put yourself in the proximity. Like I was in LA yesterday, and I was like, the Taylor Hawkins tribute's happening like in the same city that I'm here for overnight for work, but like I can't pull it off. But you know, who knows? Maybe like someone will knock on my hotel room door and be like, hey, do you want to go to the show for free?
You know what's funny to me is old Nate would have definitely pulled that off.
I
know we're getting older and slowing down a little bit because old Nate would have absolutely been like side stage somehow.
You've lost your edge, man. Hey, go see that Henry Rollins spoken word. You'll be fired up. You'll be back in the saddle.
I do have to make up for it. It's a big, I walked by the venue and everything, and I was like, oh, man, it could be mine, but I'm going to go home and crash.
Yeah, smart. Probably smart. All right, so yeah, before we get into the main segment tonight, which will be Queens of the Stone Age songs for the deaf, we are going to just kind of give you a couple records we've been listening to, over the summer and the last couple of weeks that have come out, because we haven't really had a chance to do that either because of the Tattoo of the Air thing. So, I mean, I'm going to start with just throwing it out there right now. That new Wonder Years record is awesome. I'm really excited about it. The Hum Goes On Forever, right? It came out about a week ago, almost 2 weeks ago now that you're listening to this.
Yeah, I've listened to it. So I was thinking about this record a lot, and I'm not ready to give my feedback yet. I've listened to it a few songs here and there. I listened to it all the way through a couple times. But what I want to do, I want to pull a Nate in headphones with the lyrics. I feel like it's very much a lyrical album, and there's some substance to it that I want to really soak in. I'll give a teaser. It's headed in the great direction. I just want to fully embrace it. I want to fully soak it in.
I like that. You want to give it proper attention rather than kind of play it in the background while you're doing something else, because that's multitasking. That's not giving it justice, really, right?
It's exactly what it's been. It's been in the car with kids in the background, keeping it down so I don't scare them with Soupy's yelling in some place.
Well, and I mean, it's definitely a record that you probably need to do that for. Yes. And I've listened to it both ways, and I need to listen to it again in headphones. But I had it on in the background while my wife and I were making dinner one night, and then I threw it on in the headphones late night and listened to it. And there are some standout tracks. I would not be surprised if you hear us talking about this record again a little later on this year when we give our top 5 of the year. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, that record's really cool. Go check that out if you haven't yet. And, former guest Casey Cavalier.
Yep, former guest. And they're touring again, right? Aren't they coming around again?
They are.
Run?
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's just make it happen, Tone.
I know, we need to go. It's at this point, it's like 10 days out. We need to go.
Fireworks is opening, and I think it's just those two. So at the Worcester Palladium, back at our I was gonna say second home, but maybe third or fourth home.
Yep.
Great record. What else we got? Nate, do you have one? If you don't have one, I'll toss one out.
I've been doing a lot of throwback stuff. Yeah. So and it's always situational, right? So like meeting Be Real the other day. So I spun Black Sunday and randomly pulled up My Morning Jacket, Modest Mouse, Lonely Crowded West, just because they're touring on these records, you know what I mean? The exception of My Morning Jacket. So a lot of old stuff. So I guess in tradition, kind of revisiting the same old stuff. But I did check out something that you told me about, Tone, which is The Dangerous Summer, right? Or was that you, Twan? One of you guys?
It's probably Tone.
Yep.
Both of us, yeah.
Tone and then me, and then I. Yeah. It's the game of telephone. Before you know it, it's a different band.
Before you know it, 6 months has gone by and Nate hasn't listened to it yet. But he did this time. So, hey, I'll give you credit there. Yeah, that record's really good. Really good. I'll give a couple thoughts on it. It's one of those albums where like the songs are there, but like if a different artist performed those songs, it wouldn't hit the way the what's the singer's name? AJ, yep.
AJ. I mean, the guy's got an incredible voice, and the way he delivers those songs, it just, I don't know. I texted you guys this. I'm not going to put my foot in the ground that it's the top album of the year, but it'll be top 3 to 5 all day.
Yeah, what I think's cool about The Dangerous Summer from being kind of a late bloomer fan is it has that authenticity that we all can kind of seek out, but also has that very like, it's music that could be layered in different ways. I could see those songs. I could see Dangerous Summers being layered on like a show on NBC. It could be mainstream, but it's still kind of like they're playing House of Blues, like the small room. But I feel like that band could be like a Third Eye Blind. Like all these songs kind of resonate with me a little bit, and the beats are catchy as hell. It's odd that they're not bigger. So it's one of those bands that I think you guys are early on. Like this band's likely going to blow up. They have all the right ingredients.
It's funny. Summer of 2020 is when I kind of found out about them. I was looking through, I think it was Chorus FM, former guest as well, Jason Tate. He had posted about them, and I was like, I should check that out. He usually leads me in the right direction, and this was another one of those cases where he had that record. Mother Nature was really good, and then everything. I've just kind of paid attention since, and it's kind of crazy they aren't bigger. You're right. They sound like they could be this massive band. They have the vocals just feel right for the song, and I'm not sure anybody else could pull it off the same way. And the vibe of their music there isn't a lot like it right now. It's scratching an itch for me for sure.
You know what it is for me? It's a throwback to Kerrang! Magazine, and this is a band that's blowing up in the UK, and no one knows about them in the US.
It's funny, like you say they're going to blow up. They've been in the game for like 15 years.
Yeah, they've been around a while.
And I think, I'll be honest with you, I think if they wanted to, they could be pop, a big pop act. But I think they just probably wanted to stay true to the music that they started from the jump. But I think they obviously have that in them. The songs are so close. Like one massive chorus layered into any of those songs, it'd be on pop radio.
Yeah, that's not Fuck Them All.
Let's not fuck them all. Which I love that song.
Great song.
Oh, dude, the beat of that song still rings in my head,
Yeah, that one's not going to get played on the radio.
Screw them all.
Well, CeeLo had Fuck You. They turned it into Forget You, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Forget them all.
I mean, that might work, actually. Yeah. Hey, AJ and Matt, call us up.
Yeah, we'll chat with those guys. Let's go. What do we got, Tone? You got something for us, right?
I got a game. We're going to play a game now.
Dave, you're going to play a new fun game.
Ooh, game time.
And it's a game we've played before. It's a band name real or fake game.
Oh, nice. Shit.
But this time, and this comes from last week, we were talking about, was it Hockey Dad that opened for Third Eye Blind and Taking Back Sunday that you saw this summer, Twan?
Oh,
so I thought, let's do a sports edition of band name real or fake.
Hey, did you take my advice and go to any of those bands on Spotify and then go down that rabbit hole?
There is that, yeah.
Because it's fun.
It's fun. Yeah, there's that. And then, I mean, a couple Google searches, ones that I knew off the top of my head. Yeah, there's a couple. And there are a few that we just won't do because we know them. And like Pearl Jam is technically, they were Mookie Blaylock. Like there's stuff like that, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We'll stick with probably ones that I'm hoping you guys don't know yet because you can tell me they're fake.
If I know it, I'll let Nate guess first.
All right. All right, let's start it off here. We ready?
Yeah.
Band name, real or fake? Darts.
Real.
My guess is real.
That is real. Yes, that is a real
Darts.
band. Yeah. I was a little surprised. And there's a few that are just like the name of a sport. Like American football, which I won't bring up, but because we've all heard of them. But yeah, Darts, real band name. All right.
I feel like they would be in the I would say 60% leaning towards run for cover, 40% to pitchfork, like in that world.
I think a lot of these are in that kind of vein. Some emo-ness, but there's also some like critical darling, that type of thing. All right, ready for another one?
Oh yeah.
Basketball shorts.
Fake.
I've never heard of that. I'm gonna go fake.
That is a real band.
Whoa. Oh man.
Yes, Basketball Shorts is a real band. I don't know what they do. If you guys love any of these bands, we're not making fun of them. We're just enjoying the fact that they've got sports themed names and trying to figure out if they're real or not. But we're not ragging on anybody here. We don't know who they are.
And we've said this on the podcast. This podcast could very well be a sports podcast, and we'd probably be just as knowledgeable. So we love the sports shit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, ready?
Yep.
Band name, real or fake? Shoot the J.
That's fake.
Fake. Yeah.
Yeah, I made that one up.
Shoot the J.
I was watching Chappelle's show the other night, and the Prince skit came on, and Chappelle just yelling, "Shoot the J." I'm like, that's one. I'm using that.
It could be a band name, though. That's actually not bad. Not bad.
Anybody feel free if you want to use these as your band name. If you're listening out there, just credit Patio Slave, please.
Hey, that's how Wet Leg came to be. They heard us.
Yeah, we were the reason Wet Leg came to be. Low-key, not bad, too. Wet Leg is actually pretty talented. All right, ready? Band name, real or fake? Sports edition. Field hockey stick.
I thought the name was Sports Edition. Like that. Nate, you go.
Field hockey stick. Fake.
That's fake.
Yeah, I made that one up too. Yeah. The thing about all of these is they could be.
Yeah, there's like band writing this down like, this could be an option for us. Let's just do field hockey.
The trouble with some of these band names is like if you make merch, people don't know if it's a band or if it's just like an Urban Outfitters retro thing,
Good point. That's a good point. Oh man. All right, here's a good one because it's going to be kind of a two-parter. Sports, just the word sports, and also sports with a period after it. Which one's real? Which one's fake? Are they both real? Are they both fake? You guys tell me.
Sports fake, sports of the period real.
So here's where I'm at. I feel like I've seen this, but for there to be a sports period implies that there's probably originally a sports. So they're both real.
They're both real.
Oh my god.
I was like, really? You couldn't come up with like another type of you had to put a period and just go with it?
So if this pod thing doesn't work out, we're gonna do sports ...
Yes, exactly. I'm in.
Sportio slave.
Sportio slave.
No, Sporto slave.
Those work.
I mean, it's so hard to get some of these named that Disturbed the band. Their website is disturbed1.com. So
right.
Slipknot 1.
Yeah. Oh, is it Slipknot 1? Yeah.
What about Patio Sport?
That could work. Yeah, that could work. Maybe we'll do an episode that's just about sports, the Patio Sport episode.
And no one will listen.
No one will have any idea what's going on. Man, Reddit will leave us alone. All right. Band name, real or fake? NBA champion.
I'm gonna go fake on that one.
That is fake.
That is fake. I am the NBA champion. But way back in high school, we had a Saturday night that we were hanging out at Twan's house, and I don't know, it was 3 or 4 of us hanging out, and we played a bunch of NBA Jam, and I ended up winning, so I'm the NBA champion.
So is there like a statute of limitations? Like,
I know I'm probably not in anymore. That was 20 some odd years ago, but
it's like when patents run out. Like,
yeah,
a lot of the old cartoon characters. I think like Felix the Cat. He's fair game now because it's been so long. So you're not the NBA champion. Is where I'm going with it.
No, but I will put myself. Give me like a week on the old school Sega just to get playing it again, and I will put myself up there against anybody. I'm in. Let's go.
Juice mode or no juice mode?
Dealer's choice.
Wow. I think we should pump this up.
Is it the shoes?
Is it the shoes?
We'll stream it on Twitch and
oh yeah
10 people show up.
Hey, it's 10 people that weren't there before. So all right, NBA champion is a fake band name. All right, let's go one more. TKO.
Real.
I feel like it's real.
That's a fake band name. And I looked. Now, I could be wrong. You could go out there and find it, but I couldn't find it. I scoured to see if TKO referring to boxing, right?
Yeah.
So I was surprised. I'm kind of surprised it's not a band already.
Dude, let's take that fucking name, man.
Yeah. TKO would be a great like punk band name, hardcore band name, anything in that.
Hardcore all day.
Rock. They all work, right?
XTKOX.
Yep.
One last bonus one just for Twan to laugh. National Basketball Association, but only with one S. Misspelled.
Nate, what do you think?
Fake.
That's fake. That is a reference to our friend Yanni, who bought that website domain, hoping that the NBA would buy it off him.
And he's still hoping.
Yeah, it hasn't happened. That was years ago. All right, that was a sports edition of band name Real or Fake.
It's funny how like that world it's crazy how like not only did that sound like an extrapolation of like the Midwest emo meets Run for Cover, that whole thing, the sound, everyone got on that bandwagon, but then everyone got on the sports bandwagon, the names too. It's just, I don't know if there's a pocket like that other than maybe nu metal with like the weird spelling of shit. Like that was definitely a thing.
Yep. And in the 70s with like Boston, Kansas, all those, like, let's just name it a state. Fuck it.
You guys like, dude, it happens all the time in every pocket of music.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I love that bit. We'll definitely revisit that with another theme down the line, I'm sure.
Nate, I want to get you curating a list because I feel like it'd be very obvious what's real and what's fake.
I don't know. I'm very vague with the hints, right? So it could be very. It could be very easy or very hard to the extent where there's really just no grounds to make a sound judgment. You're just like completely lost. Like I don't fucking even know what you're talking about.
90s OG. Any musician that came out of the 90s. All right, Nate, let's see.
Bands with members with blonde hair.
Yeah, that could happen. 4 non-blondes. All right. Let's get into the main segment, right?
Nate, what is the main segment? Let's lay it on us.
This segment is, so here's what's really cool, actually. Prepping for this was fun because we are an indie band podcast, like trying to make it, are we good? Are we not good? Do we suck? So in preparation to this podcast, I was in LA the last 2 days. I was like, I got some time. I've listened to this record religiously, and I'm going to listen to it again in preparation. But I also want to listen to like, what do other people think about this record? And who's gone out of the way enough to talk about it in long format podcasting or just whatever it is. And there's a lot of good just theories and just, personal stories on the record. But that's what's cool about doing these deep dives is we all have like a personal story, whether it's first time hearing it or legacy or how it applies to different things throughout your life, current and present, and even future for that matter. So we are talking about Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf, dropped August 27th, 2002. We were still in high school. We were getting closer to graduating, and this record drops, and it's a very, very profound, crazy, manic, funky, mind-blowing record that seems ahead of its time, but also kind of has hints of, replica, retro, 70s, 80s, just a weird hybrid of just so many different things. And kind of getting back into it with this deep dive just really threw me for a loop because I forgot how great the record was, but it really is just a mind fuck. So I'm happy to deep dive with you guys and just check out this record. So yeah, Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf, deep dive today.
Yeah, just turned 20.
Yep.
About 6 weeks ago now, 5-6 weeks ago now. And this is a band that we've talked about them a bunch, but we never really have gone super deep with stuff. This is a band that Nate got me into around this time. So a little after this drops, I went back and listened to Rated R and then got into this a little more and just found these guys to be, they're one of my favorite bands now. I love everything that comes out of that camp, even with some of the lineup changes here and there. Homie's been there the whole time, so I'm a huge fan. And this record, listening to it again with the ears of, we're going to put this into a podcast, I'm going to talk about it for half an hour. It was fun to like find little things that I hadn't thought about in the past and look up stories about different songs and how it was made. And it was eye-opening in that way. And it doesn't happen it doesn't happen a lot when you're listening to music that you've been listening to for 20 years that you find something new about it. But this, I found a couple things that were like, I didn't know that. That's pretty badass. So excited to talk about it with you guys for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. And Nate, you nailed it with everyone has their own unique story. The first time I've ever listened to this record front to back was in prep for this just a few days ago. Like I've heard the singles, No One Knows, Go With The Flow, a couple others like you guys have turned me on to. You Think I Ain't Worth a Dollar, which rips when we'll get into that. But besides like kind of snippets, I never gave it a full listen. So I'm coming at this with not having that, association and familiarity with it in all the history, right? Because there's records when you hear when you're younger that you just connect with. I don't have that. So I'm coming at this from like seasoned ears. Like there's some records I wish I could do this again for. So here I am. And maybe this will be one of those classic records for me. But so I'm coming at this from a little different perspective.
I love that too, because I wish that I had that because it's so...
Exactly. That's my point. Yeah.
It's so valuable. It's like being huge into this crime movies and series and then just like discovering The Godfather for the first time. You're like, oh, well, this is kind of like the cream of the crop. So like Queens of the Stone Age Songs for the Deaf is basically the cream of the crop for this style of music. And I don't even think they knew that when they were making this record. So, and here we are 20 years later. You're checking it out. We've kind of lived it during, after, and continue to revisit it. The band at the time was playing small clubs, like, 800, 900 cap clubs. And it fits the theme of the music, and we'll get into that as well. But at the same time, when you're listening to this record, you're like, well, this is fucking stadium rock. So it's like this weird, like I said earlier, mind fuck, because it's such a weird dynamic of like, this music should be giant, but this music should also be played in like a jazz club in Paris and like 2 a.m, So along with some of the random death metal that you see at a club where everyone's about to get punched in the face.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's a record that at the time the band was born out of Caius, right? That was the band prior to Queens of the Stone Age that Josh Homme fronted and was in, and to hear them kind of try to get away from Caius, but also still you can tell they came from there. Like if you listen to Caius records, like you're gonna hear Queens of the Stone Age vibes, and it's all kind of desert stoner rock, right?
Yeah.
And this record is that ride through the desert from LA to Joshua Tree. That's what they wanted it to be. It's not quite long enough. I looked at how long it is. What's it, Nate? Like an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there from LA, roughly?
Yeah.
This is a little over an hour. And so I guess listen to it twice, right? But it's like flipping through the radio and finding different things on your way out there. And like you can kind of tell as the record goes on, you're getting further and further away from civilization, and there's less out there and there's less on. And it definitely captures that vibe. And I've never done the drive, so I'm going to ask you, Nate, does it capture that vibe? Because you've done it.
That's so interesting you put it that way. Because as you were saying that, I'm like, I have actually never thought about this record in that kind of perspective. But it is a weird drive. Depending on where you're entering the desert from, like obviously I'm down in San Diego, so I'm not entering from, let's call it West Hollywood. So that's like a giant city and then going into this. And it kind of like depletes into obsolete, right? So at first you're a city, then it kind of like, there's less buildings, and then there's kind of like countryside, and then before you know it, you're out in the desert, which is the cool thing about California, because you're like ocean, mountains, before you know it, you're in this full-on desert. So it's pretty unique experience in that regard. But from San Diego, you're entering a different side. But I've never heard this record in that context, and I'd say that's probably accurate to an extent. I mean, it depends. I'd have to almost go in with that vision. And I actually know what's funny is I've played this record on trips to the desert multiple times just to feel that vibe, almost in a ultimate geek squared moment. Like, and entering Joshua Tree National Park and seeing it, the park rangers seeing a Queens of the Stone Age sticker on my car and being like, oh, those guys roll in here literally like all the time. And I just being like, makes sense, This is their backyard. So I'd say yes and no. Because I've done it, but every time, like you said, the record's so short before you get to the desert, it's already over.
Yeah, you gotta listen to it twice.
Listen to it backwards.
Listen to it backwards. Yeah.
This has that vibe for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Little fear and loathing vibe on the return.
Well, I've done that drive, the Vegas to California and then back years ago, and then that's a vibe too.
That drive is crazy. Yeah.
So me coming at this with kind of fresh ears, not fresh eyes because the visuals are, well, we'll probably get into the visuals too, but those are next level. I knew about the whole concept. So I'm thinking of that. So Nate, you're saying you haven't consciously thought of that over the last 20 years. Me, I'm going into that thinking, does this paint the picture for me? And I think it does brilliantly. Like I actually thought of like movies that I've seen where like, okay, this would fit perfect. And they're those desert, late at night drive, desert drive type of thing. So I can picture those scenes in my head. But a question for you guys, and I know it fits with the whole theme. Does the radio station DJ commentary take away from anything, or does it enhance the experience?
I think it enhances it just because, so it dropped in 2002, so terrestrial radio is still pretty relevant at the time, right? So listening to this record retroactively is another kind of interesting case study because radio, I mean, I can't remember the last time I turned on the radio, to be honest. And I hate to say that, we have friends in the industry and whatnot, but it's just a different time, right? So it is what it is. But what I see about the whole radio element is really, that's what drives this record to be a truly concept record, But it also, no matter what, gives you the opportunity to listen to this record from front to back because of that kind of interlude layer. So I love it. At first, I don't even know what I thought of it. I just thought, like, this is so weird. This record is so weird, and these radio things, and especially when you're actually getting in your car and starting it, and it's like you're starting a car. That's probably the coolest thing about this record is if you actually do listen to the record front to back, getting in your car, no distractions. I'm just going to experience this record like a fucking movie. Like you said, so the movie context is actually very strong. So I think it adds to it, but this is coming from listening to this record timelessly and just thinking, oh yeah, I mean, now I get it. Like there was an idea. Josh had an idea and is like, I want to do it like you're on, like you said, a road trip tone. And this is me driving, flipping through the stations and just, zoning out to whatever's on the radio.
Yeah. Well, and it does that. I think it does tie everything together for a record that isn't necessarily tied together by its songs. If you listen to the songs, totally. They're all over the map, right? Like you get the heavy stuff with Oliveri singing, you get the kind of subdued stuff with Lanegan, and then you get the straight up maybe typical Queens of the Stone Age type songs with Home singing them. So it's a different vibe from song to song. And this is the kind of through line, like you're out in the car driving through the desert, and you're trying to find something to listen to. And in between you get Kip Casper from KLON Radio or whatever, Clone Radio. I have that sticker on this book that all my notes are in right now. I'll take a picture of that for the socials. But I bought those stickers when this happened because when they went on sale, because I was like, I love this stuff. They're just, the idea is awesome, and I think they pulled it off. And they used a couple names we're familiar with doing that. Alan Johannes is pretty much part of Queens from this record on. Geordie White, Jesse Hughes, who's the preacher and the going into God is in the Radio. Casey Caius, who we talked with Shannon Larkin during Tattoo the Earth. He was in bands with Casey Caius. Amen, right? That's the band he was in with him. So yeah, and then Dave Ketching, who runs the studio, right? The Rancho de la Luna out in the desert, that a lot of the desert session stuff has been done at, and Queens of the Stone Age Records and other things too. So they use their friends, which we would do too. And it's a through line for a record that is, I think if you just put it out, is awesome, but the through line helps it.
Exactly. That's actually exactly why I brought all this up, which is my first listen, I'm like, I'm ready for the next fucking song. Like, let's go. Like, what are we doing? And then after finishing it and truly understanding like the whole theme and concept and the vision, I'm like, no, that has to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be.
Yeah, and I think it was from the jump, that was kind of the premise of the record. Like, this is going to be kind of like the template, and we'll fill in songs around that. And I think actually you made a good assessment earlier, Tone, which is Lanegan to Hami to Oliveri is like so crazy. And actually, this is the first time I've listened to this record and realized that they actually literally trade off song to song. So it's like Hami does a song, next song it goes to Oliveri, next song goes to Lanegan. So like it's not Hami, Lanegan, Oliveri, Hami, Lanegan. It actually is like they're trading off every three songs almost in a pretty unique sequence. So your head is spinning, like almost like changing the radio from like I'm going to reference Maine, WBLM, like classic rock, to like country, to like some kind of hard rock station. Like you're just all over the map. And the fact they were able to make a cohesive record, yes, I think that's a good assessment. With the only way to tie it together would be like, yes, you're randomly scrambling stations, because otherwise this seems like kind of a random mix of songs.
Yeah, it would be a Desert Sessions record. Otherwise, probably.
Yeah.
Which is, if you go and listen to some of the Desert Session stuff that this collective has done together over the years, they don't necessarily go together. This allowed them to make one of those, and actually they pulled some of the songs from some of those Desert Sessions to make it a through line and give it that, desert stoner rock, sort of doomy in spots, but also kind of bright in spots record.
It's funny, again, coming at this with not the history you guys have. If I didn't know there were 3 dudes trading off, I don't think I would have been like intentionally like, okay, that's a different guy singing. I wouldn't have thought that. I think now that I know it, I'm like, okay, that's definitely different. But like on You Think I Ain't Worth a Dollar, I'm like, all right, well, that's just probably Home screaming. But no, it's not. You know what I mean? Now that I know that. But I could be convinced it's him. And that's why I think the whole interlude thing helps that to the point we've been making.
Well, doesn't it help that song even the most, probably? Because it's like the start, you hear the car keys kind of jangling and the door open, and then it's like you hear the riff, but it's like it's on the radio, and then into the actual riff and the scream from Oliveri. That fucking song rules.
It's so good. It's a brilliant album opener, and it really is the musical album opener. And that would be great if they led with that live, because the gain is so fucking turned up on that. Like, It sounds like it's gonna blow your fucking speakers.
Yep.
Oh, it's happened to me multiple times, and I'm always ready for it, and it still blows out my speakers because it's so faint at the beginning that no matter what, you just never know what's a good level for when he's going to jump in, and that's actually being accustomed to the album, and it's still over the top. So they definitely mastered the record in a way where no matter what, like it's gonna just kind of shock you, almost like a horror movie where they just like randomly throw something in the screen and you can't help but be scared because it's out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, and for context, we're talking, when we say Oliveri and Lanegan, we're talking about Mark Lanegan, who since passed on, the Screaming Trees, and Nick Oliveri, who was in the band up until after the tour for this record. So he's now in Stoner?
Yep.
I think that's the band he's in now.
Oh, right on. So. And what was he in? Was he in Dwarves before that? I remember reading that.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yep. It's a funky band.
I think he's still in that band. He's active. I think he's active in like 4 or 5 bands.
I love the Oliveri songs from the early Queens of the Stone Age, world. I understand it just didn't work out with the band, but man, there's some fucking bangers that Oliveri is the singer of, and that band itself would be so cool to have, just Oliveri fronted Queens of the Stone Age. I think I'd be all in on that too.
So, again, perspective that's different from you guys. Was this unique for Queens? Because I know that the band members have since come and gone. But like this trade-off, is that present on other records?
Rated R, there is that dichotomy. But this record is so elevated. So Rated R, Oliveri and Hame, there's really no Lanegan. I mean, he's on a few things, but for the most part, it's, that dual vocalist type situation like Blink-182 or Linkin Park. So it was like understood there's going to be 2 vocalists and have that interesting dichotomy.
Well, and Mark Lanegan was never actually in Queens of the Stone Age. He was a contributor forever. So, and he is on probably my favorite Queens of the Stone Age song, In the Fade, which Third Eye Blind is also covered.
Yeah.
Some nerd facts.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's mostly Josh and Nick Oliveri early on. And mostly Josh, really, even if you listen to the self-titled Queens record and then Rated R. But there's some cool Oliveri tracks in there, too.
I couldn't help but think that Grohl must have had a decent hand in this. Like, there's
Dave
songs,
Grohl.
There's songs where I'm like, that's Grohl. In fact, there's some, does he do backing vocals on anything in this album? Because there's some parts where I'm like, that sounds like Grohl. So if it's not him, it has to be his influence.
It's funny you say that.
Fact checking in real time.
So I'm going to not fact check and just go by ear. So when I was listening today, he does come in, I think, almost like raw studio, like 1, 2, 3, go. Like in the background, you can hear, like, again, like you said, listening to records Nate style in the headphones, like you can hear Grohl, but I almost think it's almost somewhat non-intentional. But if he is adding layered vocals in the background, I wouldn't be surprised. But for the most part, he's just straight up the drummer, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I don't see anything in the credits, but that doesn't mean he wasn't doing it. And the other thing is, and you guys probably saw this in your research, but they tracked the drums differently than you typically would. They did the drum portion, the actual drums, and did the cymbals separately. And so when they were doing the drums, he had like fake cymbals to hit, and then when they do the cymbals, he had like deadened drums to hit, and they put them together later on in production in post. So I can't imagine that was fun to do because you're playing it twice. On top of the fact that it's just putting it together is probably nuts because like if there's a beat off here, then you got to do it again, right?
I did not know about this.
I'm going to ask the idiot question: why?
Because they wanted it to sound. What I read was they wanted it to sound claustrophobic. They wanted it to sound like it was this tight, like here just this piece, here's this piece, and it comes together, and it like you're in a small. He's in a small room. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I read, and I think I have to listen to it again now that I've read that, but I think there's spots where that works, and there are definitely spots where it feels like this could be a beefier drum spot. Like, obviously, no one knows the drum part is amazing. He's so good, you know it's him, and that happens a couple different times throughout the record. But there are spots, and I'm like, that's really, it's just there to accent the rest of the music, and it could be beefier, and sometimes I kind of wish it was, especially with Grohl.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I learned something. I did not know that they isolated the cymbals and the drums, but now I'm going to revisit this again for this reason. But this record plummels you to the death, already on the vocals. So the fact that they're singling out the cymbals with the drums, and then the bass is already kind of like left speaker and guitar's right speaker. Yeah, I mean, it's an all-out record. Production is actually pretty precise on this record, so it actually makes sense now.
Well, that makes me think of like when I was thinking of this, there were a couple themes that were very present for me. One is like, this is a musician album. Like this is
totally.
This is the inner Nate. This is a band's band type of thing. So there's that piece of it. Clearly, listen to it, you'll figure it out very quickly. And then the other kind of theme I thought of was this is coming from musicians. Like this album could not have come from a young band or a new band or a band's first release. Like there's just too much confidence and there's too much, I'm going to say nuance, like what you just said, like right speaker, left speaker, isolated this, isolated that. Like that's veteran shit. That's not,
Yeah.
Right.
Kids in their garage, that's seasoned vets.
Totally. And it's apparent they played music together. It's apparent they played music at all, more so than any other record. You still get some of that kind of, there are spots where there's a little bit of that grunginess to them, but it's way cleaner than, it's all there for a reason. Every note is where it's supposed to be for a reason on this record. And there are other Queen's releases that are not like that. And, that's fine too. I like that stuff too. But this one, every piece, every ounce was measured and put where it was supposed to be.
Exactly. That's like that's exactly kind of what I was getting at, which is the nuances are so intentional that you're like, well, shit, that's how it should be,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's the fact that you gave this a deep dive for this episode adds such amazing context because it's so true. Like you couldn't put this record together without that kind of layer of perfectionism, but it's still like the band was so small. So it's like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk writing like a textbook, but like you find it in the back of the library and like it just happens to be the best of the best in terms of like engineering and like product development. But, it's not being pushed. It was on radio, right? It was a mainstream record, but it wasn't like viable to what mainstream radio was. But if you are a musician, like you'll seek this out because Mark Lanegan, maybe from Screaming Trees from like the early 90s. And you're like, oh, well, I'll check this out too. And boom, oh, Dave Grohl's on the record? I know he's from Nirvana. And I'm speaking of maybe listening to this record third party, like almost like I don't even listen to the radio. I don't know what's going on, but I do like Mark Lanegan. So let's check out this textbook back of the library and check out Songs for the Deaf randomly.
Right.
And just see this masterful way of putting together a record that has really no way to make it to radio, and it still did, but really only on one song for the most part.
Yeah, no one knows. Well, Go With the Flow. Go With the Flow is pretty big, but not to the level that no one knows was. I mean, everybody, if you are a casual, I know who Queens of the Stone Age are, fan or just music fan, no one knows.
No one knows. Yeah. And that was I remember seeing the video on MTV2 or whatever it was in that 2002, 2003 range. But you just said something that kind of jogged my memory a little bit, which is I'm a music nerd. I know I haven't spent as much time with these guys, but I've been around them enough to know that they've never led with, we're a super group, we're former members of Caius, Foo Fighters. Like, in fact, like I looked it up. They have 5.9 million monthly listeners on Spotify. I bet 25% of those guys, 25% of those listeners, because some of those are no one knows people, but they don't even know who Caius is. Never heard of Caius. Didn't know that Grohl was ever in the band.
Right.
And I respect that because that's an easy out for bands to do. We've talked about it, but
yeah. I feel like, that you could totally lead with that. Maybe not today, but 20 years ago, absolutely. When, you're 7 or 8 years, 9 years removed from Caius records coming out or less, and being able to lean on that for a band that people knew from the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. The other thing there is, I know the Grohl connection, and we haven't spent a ton of time on Dave Grohl, but he rode for Caius when he was in Nirvana. I remember seeing interviews of him being like, listen to Blues for the Red Sun, listen to Caius, they're awesome, they're my favorite band, listen to Caius. And then he's working with, essentially, Caius to make a Queens of the Stone Age record, this, the third Queens of the Stone Age record, which is the one that kind of blew them up. So, full circle for him, too, and not shocked that something Dave Grohl was a part of was popular.
Water's wet.
Yeah.
Grass is green.
Yeah.
Dave Grohl enhanced something.
Yeah. Hit after hit. Weird.
But you have to think again, this dropped August 27th, 2002. So, like, even Foo Fighters at the time was, let's say, State Theater. They were playing the State Theater, Foo Fighters. Then they opened for Chili Peppers. Like, at least in the US, they were playing smaller venues in this time frame up until, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. They didn't really become the powerhouse they were. So I don't know how Dave Grohl remained.
Oh, I disagree with you.
Yeah, no, I'm
at this point, they're huge.
I'm trying to fact check what was going on in that era.
There's Nothing Left to Lose was 99, and then One by One got pushed back because of the Queens of the Stone Age stuff, but they were huge. Like, they were massive at that point.
They were massive, but it didn't seem like it was front and center.
They weren't playing the State Theater. They would not have come to Maine because they wouldn't have played the Civic Center, which we talked about last week.
They opened that Chili Pepper show.
Right, but that was 97?
At the Civic Center. Like, that was back then.
Yeah. But that's 97. That's Color and the Shape before they really blew up. Then they blew up.
Yeah.
I guess Dave Grohl was really the proponent to, really the only one in the band at the time, call it 2002 for this record, to be the one to drive this to terrestrial radio. Because Jaime was, if you knew him, you knew him. Lanegan, if you knew him. Oliveri is kind of a, also same thing. If you know, you know.
Yep.
But Grohl's, he is a name brand.
Well, and at that point, you're like, maybe they're not saying we're a super group, but they're like, yeah, Dave Grohl plays drums on this record. Like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. Because Foo Fighters are definitely big enough at that point that you're going to go check out whatever Dave Grohl's got his hand in.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go back to, they hadn't blown up yet. Foo Fighters, I'll Stick Around, was on MTV from the jump. Like, they were huge from the jump.
Yeah, you're right. And that record did well too. And we ranked those records. Go back and check that out.
Yeah.
We love the Foos here, right? We're huge fans of the Foo Fighters, but you're right. They were from the jump. People knew what they were doing. And then once Color and the Shape hit, I think all bets were off. We're tangenting here.
And let's bring it back to this album. Like, during this release cycle, I don't think they leaned on Dave Grohl's in this a lot.
No,
like,
I don't think so either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of where I was getting, but actually showcases or really underscores your point, Twan, which is it wasn't Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf with a sticker on the jewel case that said featuring Dave Grohl from the ever so giant Wembley Stadium Foo Fighters, or Nirvana. Like, Nirvana's never even been mentioned in the Queens of the Stone Age context, unless you obviously knew as a fan.
And this was 10 years removed from Nirvana. That's not
right.
Think 10 years back from now. It's not a long time ago. But anyway, I think he crushes on this album. And this was the only record he was drumming on, or
he toured with him too for this, the original tour for this record. But then that was it, because then got back into obviously making Foo Fighters records and dominating the rock world. So, all right, we haven't really done like tracks we like the most, key tracks, whatever. Let's do that. Let's toss that out there. Twan, you're the newbie to the record. What were the ones that stood out to you?
I get a few. I'm gonna start with one, and I'll just kind of lead into it. You know how there's those songs you hear when it's like going along, and then like it goes left of center or right of center, and you're like, I didn't expect that, but I loved that. First It Giveth, at the 1:30 mark, there's like this ELO vibe for 10 seconds where you can hear the strumming. Da, 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 da. I don't know if you guys can. There's probably a bad a bad version of it, but go to like the 128, 129, 130 mark, and you're like, am I in the Astrosphere at Funtown? And
Yes.
This is a vibe.
That's for those main Funtown heads right there.
Yeah, there was a ride at a local amusement park that they had ELO's
Fire on High.
Fire on High. And, you know, when you're like 10, you're like, this is trippy music. And then you grow up, you're like, oh, yeah, okay, that's awesome.
Fire on High is awesome. Yeah. ELO is badass. We love ELO. No, that's a good call. And that song was
I think it's Lynn.
No, that's Home. It's
that's
and,
Home.
And,
Okay.
and it like kind of starts with that kind of bass line, right? Like right into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like it's unrelenting. It's and then it has that kind of left turn. That's a great call. That's a good. I didn't think you were gonna pull that one. Nice.
It's almost like we getting back to the point of like it's so intentional that like it's not an accident that what I just listened to happened because it was weird, but I love it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But unexpected at the same time because they could have just gone the route, but they took, like you said, they took a left turn, which is a risk because it's going against like natural instinct, which is as a musician, I wonder like how that we don't know. That's why we interview people all the time. Like, wait a second, like you were doing this, and like for the trained ear, or even for the non-trained ear, for like the dumbass, like we are, or I am a music fan. I'm just like going for what's comfortable. And oh, dude, you went so far left center that now I have to actually somewhat catch up. So I'm a little distracted. I actually am no longer enjoying the ride. Now I'm trying to almost like grasp the counter and be like, oh, hold on, I have to rewind because I got lost. It's almost like watching a movie. You're like, I don't know what just happened.
Does that count as 2 streams? Like maybe they had a vision.
Yeah.
Like,
Smart. It's smart by them. Yeah.
we're gonna make this guy in 20 years on this random podcast listen to this record a shitload. Because Nate, you're up to like 3 listens now. I've been keeping track.
Yeah, I listened to a lot today in different contexts. Like,
No, I mean after this episode, you have to listen for the symbols now. You got to listen for that.
Oh, yeah.
There's that's a good point. There's songs on here like No One Knows is almost 5 minutes long, and at the time even is probably long for radio, but was a radio hit. So pretty crazy that they did take those calculated risks where it sounds really good and they make all the notes are put where they're supposed to, like we said, but it's also their chances taken. You know what I mean? Like that, what you just said about First It Giveth, and listen to the end of the back half of God Is in the Radio. That's a Led Zeppelin song. It's a Led Zeppelin breakdown. And I was listening to it the other night in headphones and thinking to myself, I've heard this before, but not this, obviously, sequence of notes. This is a Led Zeppelin, like, tribute in the back half of that song. And that song is awesome. So that's one of my standout tracks.
I love the contrast.
Was it the Tenacious D tribute to the tribute or what?
Yes. Yeah, those guys will probably help out on a record, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's another kind of tidbit of the vast high spectrum of different influences or just styles. Like for me, tons of different songs. Actually, both songs that you showcase are high regard for me. But Gonna Leave You, a lot of Ramones vibes. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Harmonies too. Harmonies like crazy.
Crazy harmonies. I mean, it's such an intense record, and it's like you said, it's just so relentless to the point where you're like, oh, they could have ended this song like 45 seconds ago, and it just keeps going like you're in literally like a live club. So they captured such a vibe on this record and produced it at the same time with like all those professional tricks without overdoing it, which is a really difficult balance to be like not overselling it, but also kind of, you know, I'm zeroing in. There's a microscope on this cymbal for a reason, and that is the musicians type touch, which I think I caught, but now especially I'm focusing on especially. So
I can't skip this part of the podcast without saying Mosquito Song. Mosquito Song's a top 3 Queens of the Stone Age song for me. That's just, there's so many cool twists and turns with different instruments. It's all the same song. It doesn't like veer off from what it's trying to be, but you get different instruments throughout it and different like feelings. It's so fucking good. That's such a great song.
All right, so another thing about this record, and we've discussed it at length on this podcast for different bands, different styles of music. It's package. It's ethos. It's optics. The record, the artwork, the theme. I mean, I have the vinyl right here. I brought it with me for this. Just looking through it, it's like an amazing comic book, but it also captures like the production and the themes and the lyrical content of this record. It just reminds me of like a Quentin Tarantino film. Like it's
yeah.
There's so many like unique artistic touches on this record that it's like mimicking art, but in like this really unique fashion that like is almost making fun of the said subject in a weird way, like going over the top just for the sake of it.
Well, yeah, clone radio, it's
exactly
right.
Oh, and I love that, right? Any music fan can relate with that, just because it's like, yeah, the radio, like, unfortunately.
Well, and then all the preachers and the religious radio you hear towards the end, going into God is in the radio, like you're in the middle of nowhere, and this is all that's on the radio is this.
Oh, yeah. That I can actually relate with in the desert, because it actually fades out where there's no signal except for that. So that's pretty spot on. But yeah, like the record theme, like it's one thing to get it down on record in terms of audio, but to get the visual, like the vision to transfer over to something tangible and artistic wise, that takes like something that I don't personally know how that works. But you must be late night, 2 a.m, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. Thinking,
it's drugs, man.
Or drugs.
Yeah. It's drugs. I mean,
like, this is what I had in mind. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I like really loved was on Song for the Dead. It's almost like this haunting vibe to that song, where I can't help but think that there's people coming off a bender driving through the desert. I'm like, this, I don't know what I'm visualizing, but whatever I'm visualizing matches what I'm hearing, and it's perfect.
Totally agree. And you're right, it's drugs. Yeah. It's how you get there. Maybe not completely, but they're definitely helping.
Yeah, I can't think of another album that like has that visual. There's songs that I think of where I'm like, all right, well, this is happy, this is summer day stuff, but in terms of like maybe a darker place or isolated place, it knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. It totally delivers on. You pick that CD up in 2002, you're like, man, this looks like it could be some shit. I'm into. I'm down for this. Like this is a vibe. And then you put it in the CD player and you get that first kick into, you think I Am Worth a Dollar, and you're like, all right, time for a ride. Yeah.
I think it captures that you don't know what's going on in the world. You're in a random dusty record store and you see that record cover, and like, no matter what, like it's a case study on less is more. Like, I don't know, this looks cool. It's pretty simple. Let me flip it over. Okay. Now these song names like are kind of catching me. I don't know. I guess I'll check it out, and you're hooked. But it's that organic feel, like you discovered it or you didn't. But even if you didn't, like the whole artwork thing, like really, really plays into it. And they really nailed it. And I don't know how that works, but Twan, you might be right. Maybe it's just straight up drugs.
Well, there's an alternate cover, right? There's almost like the sperm that looks like the Q, and then I like the more traditional one, which looks like almost like a pitchfork, right?
Yeah, that one's so cool.
And it's very basic. It's stripped down. The colors are on point. It just, it's inviting, but it's like inviting with caution. You're like,
right.
I'm in, but
right.
I don't know what the fuck to expect.
Yeah, like this could be everything I want it to be, or it could fuck up my whole world. I have an odds and ends thing that I just want to throw out there.
Yeah.
The opening line to go with the flow. She said, I throw myself away. They're just photos after all. So fucking good.
Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff you only get with kind of Queens and Josh's writing. He's underrated as far as that stuff's concerned, I think. There are lines like that throughout that song. There are lines like that throughout this record and other Queens of the Stone Age records. So But I just love that. She said I'll throw myself away, and then kind of a break. They're just photos after all. Like, oh, okay, that's what you're throwing away. I thought you were doing something worse. Like, it's on the edge, you know? Like, it's so fucking smart. And once that other shoe drops, you're like, all right, now I get it.
I'm glad you brought that up because the lyrics are almost secondary and the vocals are very secondary.
Yeah.
It's one of those bands where it's another instrument where it's not like up front, you know, where like a radio band or pop singer, it's very upfront. I don't think the vocals are. I think they're very subdued. In some tracks, you got to really listen even to what the lyrics are, but it all fits. But and that's one thing I didn't do, which is listen to this with the lyric book.
Well, sometimes you'd be like, "Damn, awesome," and sometimes you'd be like, "The fuck are they talking about?" So
that's the drugs, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like the Dangerous Summer kind of album review earlier, or sorry, the Wonder Years earlier, where you have to listen to this record in kind of different scenarios to really understand it. But best scenario being nothing, no distractions, listen to the record straight through, really study it, and try to absorb what the hell's going on, because there's a lot of moving parts. But it is true artistry for sure, and I think anyone that plays in bands can agree that this is just such a unique experience. And it's the only record, I take it back, I walk it back. It's one of the few records where I listen to where I'm like, man, writing this record for us in our age, in our late 30s, is the only one of the few records I can think of where it must have been like that lightning in a bottle moment where like, this is like a band in like Led Zeppelin mode where like, there's just so much energy in the room. They're going to put out something amazing no matter what, in a time where music is not really reflecting that kind of sound at all. So, and it couldn't have happened later. It couldn't have happened earlier. It just happened to be in that kind of early 2000s era for whatever reason, and works. But it's a perfect storm.
I'm going to jump in there. I totally agree with that, because imagine if this whole concept of like, we're going to bring in this person, this person in 2022, if that happened, it'd be like so much Loudwire hype about it. It would be, and it'd almost take away from it. It's like, well, this better fucking bring it or it's going to be a letdown. Where this was just, I feel like it just kind of happened, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, another odd and end thing here. Adam Casper, who my guess is the muse for the name, the DJ Kip Casper at the beginning. He's one of the producers, and he's worked on a bunch of stuff that we're pretty familiar with. Soundgarden's Down on the Upside, Cold, 13 Ways to Bleed on Stage, Foo Fighters 1 by 1, obviously this record, Pearl Jam's Riot Act, a couple Eddie Vedder records, Into the Wild and Ukulele Songs, Soundgarden's Live on I-5, and King Animal. So like pretty well worked with some records and bands that we love on top of this record. And then Eric Valentine also had a part in, whether it was musician or production, in some Third Eye Blind stuff, Smash Mouth stuff, and I think also, Good Charlotte, and former guest Nick Wheeler of the All American Rejects was part of a song with them too. So did some composing and writing with those guys. So people that have worked throughout the industry and people that we've talked to, it's pretty cool the connections that there are here. It's a smaller world. We always say that it's smaller than we think it is, right?
Well, one thing I read, and people would have to fact check this, but I read that Valentine was like brought to the scene, brought to this album by the label, by Interscope, and that's very interesting. Like, I couldn't help but think, like, with this podcast, if we ever signed to iHeartRadio and they were like, well, we got this guy, he's your new producer, like and we're like, huh? Like it had to have impacted things, but maybe not much, because this album is great. Maybe it helped it.
Yeah.
Wow, no, that's a good point. There must be some like really strong guardrails, like, hey, this is the vision, like I was saying earlier, Jame's drug fueled fucking 3 a.m. napkin sketch, like, this is what we're doing, coming to the picture or not. Dave Grohl's a buddy of mine from back in the day. I know he's a fucking superstar, but we're going to promote this. We're going to do a club tour. Like, for instance, the first tour for this record, like, it was all clubs.
I bet that was loud. That must have been so fucking loud, especially like, you know, if they're touring off this, they're probably going to play like, I ain't worth a dollar.
And that was the venues for this whole first run. And that's Lanegan, Groll on drums, Jaime and Oliveri. And then I guess they got a replacement drummer. after that. But yeah, they guns blazing. This is for the musician. We're gonna play clubs. We could probably play theaters, and I obviously graduated to that and continue to escalate. What a fucking record! What a fucking banger! I wish I was a musician so I could relate to the influence on this record playing or writing music, because listening to this record, I kind of get into that mindset where like, oh, I can hear the little subdued parts where like that is so artistic, but you have to almost be sketchbook diary writing down, this is what I want to do. So it's been mapped out, but this record is proof that you have a vision and you want to do something, that's in your head and put it on paper and put it out. Like this is Josh Homme's kind of like a Wizard of Oz type record. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And it's appreciated. It's a musician band. And not just this album, but the whole band. Like Tone, you saw it down in Worcester. You wearing a Rated R t-shirt. You must have got 3 comments about that shirt, 2 from bands. Chris Beatty from Hatebreed and Chris Link from Terror. Like both.
They're both like, nice Queens of the Stone Age shirt. I'm like, hell yeah, dude.
And that's out of genre for the music they play. I'm sure they listen to everything, but it's universal band.
Nerd sees nerd.
Nerd sees nerd. Comments on shirt, head nods, and then you have a conversation.
Yeah, that was fun, and I picked that shirt on purpose, thinking that there'd be people there that would know what I was wearing, and they did, and that was fun. It's one of those social experiments.
And again, that's less is more, as Nate said with that album. Like they have a way of, a graphic designer could have thrown that together in 2 minutes. The Rated R, and same thing with Queens. Pick the font, distort a pitchfork, and you're good.
Well, it's like anything. The product needs to be good too. And the product in this case is very fucking good. And that's why we're spending, 45 minutes talking about that record 20 years later.
And that's actually why I was thinking earlier, like, this is very Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. Like, the artwork is so simplistic. I don't know what this is, but it captures you. So less is more for sure. I think that's tried and true. But the end product actually has to be good. But you just don't need to go overboard in terms of optics.
Drop the right?
Yeah, exactly. Sean Parker.
To quote Sean Parker. Fucking Zucks. All right, on that note, I think we're probably good, right, boys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hit us up. All the call to action stuff's coming your way here in about 3 seconds. But, excited to do this again with you guys. We'll do it again next week. We might have a former guest joining the 5-Timers Club. Who knows? Check it out. Coming next week.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Yeah, he's a veteran. She or he. We'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Peace, potheads.
Push a T out.
Push a T.
Push a T out. If you know, you know.
Thank you for listening to Podio Slave. We are at Podio Slave on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the places that you can find us on social media. Facebook, Podio Slave Podcast. YouTube, Podio Slave Podcast there. Email us at podioslavepodcast@gmail.com. And hey, if you want to become a supporter, click on the link at the bottom of the episode and give us $1, give us $5. It keeps the lights on, keeps us going. We really appreciate that stuff. Thank you.
You're recording, right? Did I accept? Oh, I don't even know.
You must have. Well, I'll leave that in.
What is this? 2-factor authentication? You're not there yet?
You should totally keep this.
I'll put it at the end. I can put it at the end. Yeah, I'll put it at the end.